Today is the day. Please tell me today is the day.
Today's the day for what?
We finally start putting the supercharger on the motor.
Yeah, we can do that. I don't see any problems with putting that thing in. We're pretty much ready to put spark plugs back in, put the coils in, change up some harnesses, it looks like, some lines, and then it looks like the manifold goes in. So yeah, today's the day.
Welcome to episode 4 of our 2017 Mustang build series. If you're not already a subscriber, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We don't want you to miss out on any of the rest of the episodes. Today is the day where we actually start putting some supercharger pieces onto this motor. So we don't know if we'll actually get started today. Depends on how long it takes us, but pieces will be going on.
I gapped all the plugs to 0.028 inches. We're getting ready to put some anti-seize on the threads and drop them back into the car. What we have here is already modified heater hoses. They came with the supercharger kit that we ordered. We did get it used and it had everything already pre-cut, pre-installed, so we figured we'd just use that since it was already done. And according to the instructions, it said that we have to take this hose, there's a restrictor in here, like right here where the band is. We're supposed to cut it and then install a supply 90 with the brand new kit. So since that's already done here, we're going to be able to take this hose out and just replace it with this one. And it looks like it's going to go something like that when we're done. So I clipped in, and move back the tape a little bit, and this falls right into place right there. And it's going to go down kind of like that. We'll keep it out of the way up until we're ready to put the supercharger in, and then we'll readjust it. But that's basically it there.
Put the water pump back on?
Yeah, we're going to put the water pump back in the vehicle. We had to remove it from when we did the oil gear. So that's going to go back in, and then that'll allow us to put the driver's side heater hose in. There we go. Here, like that. Look at that. Put this back on before I forget.
Manifold.
Lower manifold. Let's get the fuel rails and we'll start prepping the fuel rails to go in. All right. With the lower intake completely bolted in, fuel rails are bolted in, let's plug in the fuel injectors itself, which is pretty tight, but it does fit, which is good. We have this adapter to adapt the new fuel rail to our factory fuel line. What we're going to do is we're going to put this adapter in line with it as well. And this will allow us to be able to run our fuel pressure sensor without having to cut into any lines. So. All right, we're at step 101, what you've been waiting for. Carefully install the supercharger assembly onto the intake manifold. So that's what we're gonna do now. And we gotta put the front down first.
Yep.
What we're going to do is we're going to put the bolts in, get them put in and torqued up according to the torque spec here, and move on with our 10 rib belt drive assembly. Alright, here we go with the new ATI Super Dampener for the 11 rib kit. I'm sorry, 10 rib kit. We now have the balancer on, torqued to 100 foot-pounds, and we are going to attempt to put the air conditioning belt back on. Because there's no tensioners or adjustments of any kind, we found out we had to cut the factory belt off because it's a stretch belt. So with this balancer, there's no holes in it. So we're going to attempt to take out one of the bolts that holds the two pulleys together, put a wire tie through it, and see if we can get it to work. Let's give it a shot. Start around the crank. And then this comes around the alternator. This comes around this pulley. A big ratchet. Way better. All right. Realign that. Okay, looks like we got it. Wasn't too bad. What we have here is the heat exchanger that mounts up behind the front bumper and pumps the coolant up into the lower heat exchanger up underneath the lower intake. We already have the brackets on here. These get mounted to the bumper supports. So let's go fit it in place. We got the heat exchanger mounted. We have the wiring harnesses plugged in place of where they're supposed to be connected. We're gonna end up taking off the throttle body to run the coolant hoses for the heat exchanger. So when we do that, we're gonna run these wires up underneath the supercharger, get everything real cleaned up. The water tank for the heat exchanger gets mounted here underneath the fender. So we're gonna lift the car up and get that in place so we can run the rest of the coolant lines. Looks like these go up in here. We're going to take the throttle body off in order to run the lines for the upper and lower hoses for the heat exchanger, and clean up some of the rest of the stuff. Put this back on, put the air box in, and we should be pretty good. Opens up some space. This is going to come up over here. We have to hook up the line that goes from the upper heat exchanger to this lower heat exchanger, and there's a piece of plastic in the way. So we're going to drill a hole to pass the line through and hook it up. All hooked up. So that's there. All right. There's that. Let's put the air filter on. Hey, there it fits.
Does not come with the kit.
No, this
But
is
the
an
guy
app.
that we bought it from had it,
Imagine that.
and he gave it to us with the kit when we bought it. So it came with the kit, but it doesn't actually come with the kit.
It comes with our kit. Looks like we have everything attached that we need to have attached. Doesn't look like anything's rubbing from our checks here. We'll keep an eye on it when we first start it up. We have the battery charger on just to put some juice into the battery. We're getting ready to put some fluids in, and the tuner is going to be coming here in a few minutes. We're going to put a base tune in and fire this thing up.
Moment of truth.
Let's see what happens. Checking over everything, make sure we're good. I think we're ready to start this thing up. Belt looks good, everything looks tight. Coolant's in it, oil's in it. I think we're ready to go.
All right, time to play.
What's the game plan? What's the first steps?
All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna get a base file set up, get this thing fired up, get it warmed up, make sure we have no leaks or problems like that. And then I think Ross said he wanted to do a couple more things with the drive shaft and the axles before we get it on the dyno, so we'll just get it good enough to run and move around the shop without worrying about anything. So let me go and sit in the car, pull the file out, and we'll go from there. So now we're going to pull the file out and read everything out of the PCM and start making changes to get this thing to run with the new injectors and blower. Don't need that right now. GlowShift Mustang. Save. And what we're going to do is just start making some changes and get this thing ready to fire up. And the most important thing is going to be scaling the computer for these injectors so we don't wash the cylinders down. Put the power back on. Let's go ahead and flash this file, get this thing fired up. Intercooler pump screaming. Alright, the file's verified. Alright, let's see what we got.
I guess that means you started it correctly.
We did something right.
Cool. Next is going to be button everything up and get on the dyno.
Couple more episodes.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. All right, the car is completely back together. It's running, has a base tune in it, so that way we can move it if we need to, drive it to the tuner when it eventually goes to get tuned. We're not going to get it tuned until after it has the clutch and the new drive shaft and axles in it. So, but in the meantime, now we're going to put in our GlowShift gauges, and that is going to be done by. It's going to be done by one of our GlowShift techs. Like we already did before when we were putting all the things back in, all of the sensors are ran and through the firewall, so all we have to do is connect them to the gauges, power the gauges, get the dash panel put in, and get them all set up and ready to go.
So what we're going to have is a triple gauge pod right here on the pillar, and then we're going to remove this piece here, and we're going to replace it with the GT350 panel that has a dual gauge pod built into it. We boost fuel pressure and wideband, and then we can have oil pressure and nitrous pressure as well.
Don't be scared. There we go. Voila.
All right, so we're just going to test fit this in here, and so we have to cut any of these panels to fit the gauges. And it's looking like we're going to have to trim right here. So let's test fit this in. So we're going to remove the radio so we can see which way we want to run the wires. There we go. Tape the wires to the extension and then pull them all through. Perfect. So now we have our wires through. We can run them to where the gauge is going to go. So for this car, the fuse panel is down on that passenger side kick well. So this time we're just going to do the opposite of what we just did. Instead of pulling the wires through, we're just going to push them down that way. This will make it a little easier, and then we can just connect all of our power wires together. Ta-da! And there we have it. Power harnesses all connected together. The rest of those wires can be pulled through and ran behind the dash.
I guess that's a good sign.
Yeah. Install the gauges in the pod, but to do so, we have to use our extended studs and the bracket to hold them in place. Gauges are straight, secure, and they're ready to go in the car. Alright, so we're just going to mock this vent up here, take a look, see how it fits now. And it looks alright, but I think we're going to pop out these brushed vents here and put the factory chrome ones back in.
There you go.
We got these two pieces also. We're just going to replace the rest of the brushed paneling in here so it matches the rest of the black ones. Now we're all set. All right, so now we're going to put our other 3 gauges on our pillar pod here. So in order to do that, we have to pull the factory pillar off and then run our wires up through the dash to here so we can connect everything together. So pull this off, grab in here, just pop those clips, pull them out, and then you have a wiring harness back here for the speaker. Just unplug that and you're good to go. With this GlowShift pod, we do lose the factory speaker in the pillar. So we're just going to tuck this wire down here into the dash and get that out of the way. And then once that's out of the way, you take these wires for a wideband and our fuel pressure gauge, and just going to route them up here up to the top. Get them over. Just going to run these power wires down from the top down to the bottom of the dash so we can run them over to our passenger side fuse box. So we have the pod. Now we're going to run our boost gauge through so we can start wiring everything up. Now that the wires are all tied together, we can run everything through the pod and then put the gauges in. So now the pod should slide right up here and pop right into the factory clips. going to plug in our wideband gauge. The green wire is going to be our left bank. Blue wire is going to be our right bank. And lower plug is the power wire. Once those are all plugged in and secure, just going to tuck this wire in here. Slide the gauge in there nice and straight. And we have wideband, fuel, and boost. The wideband gauges come with these 2 wideband control boxes. Since we're using a dual wideband gauge, there's one for each sensor. So what we need to do is we're going to plug everything in, each sensor to a box, and then the power harness to a box over here. And then we're going to tuck everything up once we remove these panels. So we're going to start by pulling these panels off first. Now both boxes are labeled. So you plug this sensor into the sensor port, power harness into the power port on both of them, and then the gauge harness into the gauge port on both of them. Now that they're all wired up, we're going to take our power wire for the wideband gauges, run them over with the rest of our power wires, and then tuck everything up. Now that we have 3 separate sets of wires, one from the center console, one from the gauge pillar, and then a third one from the wideband, we're going to splice all these ones together and then get power from our fuse box back here behind the pillar. So now we just got to tuck up these wires, get them over to the fuse box, hook up our expandable circuits, and then we can wire everything together. So the red for these 7-color series gauges is going to be our switched power source, which is going to go to an ignition on. Then we have our yellow, which is going to be our constant power. The reason we have a constant power for these gauges is because they're color changing. We use the constant power for the memory feature to remember what color you set it to. So that way you don't have to change back to your favorite color every time you start the car up. And we're just going to put an eyelet connector here on our ground wire. Now we have our orange wire. This one's optional, but this basically allows you to hook this up to a headlight source, so that way when you turn your headlights on, the gauges dim. So now we take our constant fuse, put it right in here, slide it into our expandable circuit, and then we plug our expandable circuit back into that constant fuse slot. Now we have our switched ignition fuse, and do the same thing. Slide it in here, back into the fuse box. And now we have our headlight fuse, and that's going to go back into here. Just going to hook up our ground. Alright, so now that everything's hooked up, hopefully everything should be done correctly, and now we can just test it out.
All right, that is it for episode 4. The Supercharger is in the car and the car is running again. We got our gauges installed. We're not gonna get a dyno tune just yet because we wanna switch out the suspension components and some drivetrain parts. before we go and see what the final numbers are. If you're not already subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We don't want you to miss out on any of the action, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right, we got her off. Race car.